for the women's basketball championship. And I didn't get a chance to watch this on Sunday, unfortunately, as I was out and about on Easter, spending it with family. But man, if you had told me going into this game that the winner would prevail by a score of 79-51, I for sure would have thought that the Gamecocks were once again national champions, because I thought going into this game that UCLA was the underdogs. I think a lot of people felt that way. And for them to prevail by 28 points, I mean, they got out to a double-digit lead at the end of the first quarter. They really controlled this game, and the UCLA women's basketball program wins their first national championship, which is remarkable in itself. Corey Close, in her 15th year as the head coach of this program, finally breaks through and gets the job done. Lauren Betts transfers from my school, Stanford, after her freshman year. She spends a couple years at UCLA. They lose in the Final Four last year. You have a Gabriela Jaquez, younger sister. Yes, the younger sister of Jaime Jaquez, who is now on the Miami Heat. And she was kind of that do-it-all player who basically made all the little plays. And you have a point guard in Kiki Rice, who is just an absolute floor general. She'll be nice in the WNBA one day. But this UCLA team, they had all the pieces, but many people like myself who follow women's basketball didn't really expect them to get this far. And so I know that, Kevin, you and Jaevon aren't absolutely locked in on women's college basketball, but Kevin, did you have any thoughts on this women's tournament in general, or the fact that UCLA ended up hoisting their first trophy?
You know, I am not. I would call myself a casual because that's not giving myself enough respect. But I did watch the what I thought was the national championship game was UConn, South Carolina. That game was a lot better than this game. I know the score doesn't show it because South Carolina pulled away at the end. But UConn and South Carolina are going back and forth. I love a good story of a team not losing a single game. So I was low-key rooting for UConn to go and just go 41-0, I think it would have been. That just goes to show how good the coaching staff is over there and the players. You know, they really build a foundation, especially in this NIL era, where you can get paid to go play somewhere else as a freshman. Why would you sit on the bench behind potential NBA players or WNBA players, excuse me. But, you know, hats off to UCLA. South Carolina just didn't show up. You definitely got the vibe just thinking that they wanted to beat UConn. And then once they beat UConn, it was kind of that. And I know a lot of the story was Dan Stanley versus Gino and kind of all that stuff that happened before the game. Him saying she didn't shake his hand, but there's obvious evidence that they did. So, you know, now people calling Gino a sore loser, A, B, C, and D. But, you know, hats off to UCLA. First time the second time in the past 5 years where the same brand has won both men's and women's national championship.
Yeah, and to follow up on what Kevin was saying, I also thought that semifinals game was the national championship. And that's what made me so shocked when UConn won by the margin, or excuse me, UCLA won by the margin that they did, because I thought for sure UConn versus South Carolina was for the national championship, just like I thought that Michigan versus Arizona was for the men's national championship, basically. And it's a shame. It even takes us back to the NFC championship in the NFL this year, where we all felt like that game was the Super Bowl, and then whoever made it was going to end up beating whoever came out of the AFC. The thing about the whole Gino and Don Staley situation is that Gino has won on the highest of levels for years and years and years. I've lost count of how many national championships he has off the top of my head. But that just seemed totally out of character for Gino Auriemma to react the way he did and to treat Dawn the way that he did. And he said, oh, well, she didn't shake my hand. They showed clips of when both teams came out onto the court of Dawn Staley shaking hands with everyone on the UConn staff, starting with Gino Auriemma. But I feel, just to play devil's advocate for Gino, they did show another clip on SportsCenter after the one that Kevin was describing, where Dawn's shaking hands with everyone, and that's what she said. I shook hands with everyone. But what Gino may have been referring to is at the end of the starting lineups, he was standing at midcourt waiting for Dawn to come shake his hand at the end of the starting lineups. I don't know coaching well enough to know if that's a tradition that happens every single game, and that's what Gino got so upset about. But I honestly thought that he did this and all these antics to take the heat off of his players. You have AZ Fudd in her career coming to an end, and she did not play very well. Sarah Strong, who is the National Player of the Year, she got shut down for the most part by Raven Johnson, who's like 5 inches shorter than her. And so she kind of crumbled under the pressure. Or maybe Raven was just that elite of a defender that she was able to limit the National Player of the Year. But my point is, UConn's top two players didn't necessarily show up in that Final Four game. And I felt like Gino's antics was to take the heat and the spotlight off of them so then they could kind of just fade back while he took all the heat. And so I felt like after seeing how South Carolina performed in the national championship game, that he kind of got into the heads of the Gamecocks, like the whole team, and kind of shifted their focus on from what the mission should have been to what they were still dealing with and still hearing about from a day or two prior. And I think Gino Auriemma would much rather see UCLA win their first championship than see South Carolina win their fifth championship in the last 10 years. And so that's my whole thought process on it. Gino, as Kevin mentioned, later issued a statement where he was like, I was wrong. I shouldn't have acted that way, yada, yada, yada. Point is, the focus was still taken off of his players at that point. We're focused on his statement. And South Carolina didn't just lose the national championship. They got the brakes beat off them. And a stat I wanted to mention is that South Carolina is the first team in women's college basketball history to lose back-to-back national championships by 20 points or more. As we remember last year, they lost to UConn by 20-plus points. And so that's something that I thought was pretty interesting. Toddy, before I toss it to you, I want to share my final thought on this whole situation. Is my favorite part about all of this is that Dawn Staley, after Gino came at her the way that he did, which was totally unwarranted, but after he came at her, mics could pick up when Dawn was saying to her assistants, I'm going to, earmuffs for Mako now that he has joined the room. But Dawn was saying, I'm going to beat Gino's ass. I'm going to beat Gino's ass. That was my favorite part about that whole situation. But that's also my thoughts on why Gino did what he did. Mako and Jaevon, the Toddies, what was your reaction to UCLA winning its first women's game?
So I wanted to actually give some props to UCLA, Gabriella Jaquez. She had a double-double. She went 21 and 10. All right. She was out there hooping. UCLA, I gamble. Gotta bring up the gamble. They were plus 165 before tip-off. So, you would have gambled on them, you'd have made a pretty good ton of money. I do want to say this. UCLA, congratulations. You guys won national championship. I get all of that. But Wonder Woman is back. Starting next year. Wonder Woman, Supergirl, whatever y'all want to call her.
Captain America
is back starting next year. And might I remind you, when USC played UCLA, it was belt to ass when Juju was on the court. So I do want to put it all on notice. College sports, Juju Watkins is back. Mako wants to let y'all know she ain't nothing to be played with. That's all I'll say right now. Hey, UCLA, congratulations. You guys won your title. Juju Watkins is coming back to the sport next year, and the whole world will be put on notice. How soon they forget? How soon they forget that she's not been on. We all know when she was healthy, she was the best player in college basketball. That's all I'm saying. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, well, and also to add on top of that, with Juju Watkins coming back, let's not forget that the Trojans, they got Jazzy Davidson now. She is nice. Like, not only is she just a beautiful woman in general, but she is such a talented hooper. Like, she is an absolute baller. And that showed throughout this tournament. Even when South Carolina took out USC in the round of 32. I mean, Jazzy became the only freshman in women's college basketball history to total 31 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists in a March Madness game. The other player to do it was Caitlin Clark. That's the end of the list. Jazzy Davidson is just an absolute baller, and now you pair her with a Juju Watkins. Oh, and the fact that the Trojans got the number 1 player in the nation coming to join them next year, that big three is going to be disgusting. So I guess we could probably pencil in that the women's national championship is going to stay in Southern California. It's just going to go over to SC instead of staying at UCLA because Juju's back. Jazzy is coming in as a sophomore, and then they got the number 1 player in the country coming through. And so USC is going to be tough to beat next season.